And now, Rate That Album, Season 3, with Paul Muad'Dib and Joe Fremming. Two guys who know stuff.
Hi, and welcome back to Rate That Album, back and forth album review between myself, Joseph Fremming, and my good friend Paul Muad'Dib. Paul, fire up the crack, boys. Cinch up my diaper, turn the TV on.
Give me a blowjob before I'm on the nod.
Yeah, so this week I decided to hop in the Wayback Machine and visit the first solo album by a guy who stands tall in music history, but is not really recognized. And that is Mark Lanegan, frontman for the Screaming Trees. Guy has had an interesting career and an interesting life. He's recorded albums with Greg Dully from the Afghan Wigs, Isabel Campbell from Belle and Sebastian. He was one of the singers for Queens of the Stone Age. He did a song with Moby and Chris Christopherson.
I need that in my life.
And he was also one of Kurt Cobain's closest friends. And we'll get into that a little bit later, because the album we're reviewing does feature Mr. Cobain on it. We're talking The Winding Sheet by Mark Lanegan, 1990. So, Paul, let's get your initial thoughts on this.
So I and I apologize. I hope the echo is not coming through too much. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I knew a little bit about Mark here and there. I didn't know as much. When he died, I read all these articles. And I was like, oh, I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he was a part of that. So I didn't realize just how big his shadow was until much later. Do you want my initial thoughts on the album or just on him?
Well, let's do both, Paul. We can do two things.
We can do two things. All right, fair enough. So, this is not a lot of respect for Mark. This is not my favorite thing that we've done on this show. Not that I dislike it, but there is a lot of flaws on it in terms of production. But at the same time, when I look at when it was done and how everyone took a lot of stuff from it, you realize that it's much more brilliant than it sounds. And I don't know if that makes sense to the audience.
Yeah, if you've heard this album, it's very simplistic. That's by design. We'll talk about how he recorded this, but it's a lot of the complaints is because it's not doesn't feel fully formed, but formed enough where it shines. Where it doesn't, it's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much DNA in this album. That's kind of why I picked it.
Yeah, it's very much, that's a great way of putting it. It's a DNA album.
Yeah, it's a DNA, I think, for his songwriting. We talked a little bit before we started recording, how much more interesting his other projects seem to be compared to this. This is, a guy in his early 20s doing a solo album. We really had no, nobody knew, because, so again, a little bit of a story. He's the frontman for a band called Screaming Trees out of some podunk town in Washington. He sees this as his way to get out of his bad situation. He's a drug addict and alcoholic, most of his teen years. And by the time he starts with this band, he's sobered up. And they kind of start getting this cult following. They sign on to, well, they don't really sign on, because SST Records is pretty much come and go as you please. And I think we could do a whole podcast on the shit show that is SST Records, Paul.
Oh, God, yeah.
Greg Ginn from Black Flag, infamous for kind of screwing over a lot of bands. you'll never find Bob Mould saying a kind word about Greg Ginn, considering he's hijacked the Husker Du albums that they recorded.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but they signed onto that, and it's just kind of like, they were just a struggling band, but it was coming up in this Washington scene where all these other bands are kind of like doing the same thing. Like they're raised on both, they're coming of age with both punk rock, but like classic rock bands like, Led Zeppelin. So it's like this weird DNA in all these bands. And of these bands coming out of Seattle, you have Green River, Mother Love Bone, which would eventually morph into, Pearl Jam and your Alice in Chains. You got a band out of Olympia. You got two bands out of Olympia. You got the Melvins and you got Nirvana. It was just kind of like this melting pot, and Screaming Trees were kind of like the first wave coming out where they're starting to make an impact, but like Lanegan hated everything they did. He didn't write the songs. That should be noted. Like early Screaming Trees, he wasn't the songwriter, was the guitarist, which frustrated him all to hell. By the time 1990 rolls along, Sub Pop offers him an offer to do a solo album based off of recordings that Lanegan did with Kurt Cobain, which was going to be a Lead Belly tribute album.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, Lead Belly, old blues guy, That's another fascinating story we could probably do a whole podcast on. But basically the germ of this started with Cobain and Lanegan recording a few Lead Belly covers, but just didn't come to anything besides what lands on this album with Where Did You Sleep Last Night, which is the same arrangement Nirvana would use on their Unplugged album. A few other recordings survived that. I think that's on with the Lights Out box set Nirvana released in like 2002, 2003. But that's really where this kind of starts, because Lanegan was so flustered because he hated all the Screaming Trees song. He thought the songs were embarrassing. He really didn't like anybody else in the band. It was just more like they're there. It was a group effort just to get the hell out of their podunk town. And as soon as he got his opportunity to do things outside of that, he would really grasp onto it. So we get to the winding sheet. Sub Pop offers him $13,000 to make a solo album. And he laughs because in his mind, he's like, I can make an album for $3,000 and just pocket the 10, which he did.
That explains a lot.
Yes. Going into this project, though, he realized he had never really written songs. He was always just the vocalist. So reading his book, his memoir, he decided to buy a piece of shit acoustic guitar and just start trying to figure out how to write songs, which is why a lot of this seems very simplistic, because it's a guy trying to figure it out and recording it at the same time. He records the album with a few guys. Cobain shows up and does vocals on what was it? Down in the Dark. It's a very sparse album, but he was also super. Or the other guys in Screaming Trees were inspired by 60s garage rock. Lanegan was more drawn to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Nick Drake, singer-songwriter type shit. And that really starts to show.
Real quick, I just want to say, because, I don't think Nick Cave gets enough credit, because when you look at all these artists, really, really good artists, Nick Cave's name comes up all the fucking time.
Yep. Yeah, Nick Cave is brilliant. He's I love Nick Cave.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to Nick Cave at some point on our little podcast here.
Yes, we will.
But so the album didn't really do anything after it's released. It was just out there, but it got. He says in his book, well, at least got better reviews than anything the Screaming Trees ever put. It's also noted, from what I can tell in the book, he's sober when he writes this. He's 3 or 4 years sober. which I thought he was probably fucked up when he recorded this, but that's not the case.
I thought he was.
Given Juarez.
Yeah, we'll talk about Juarez.
Yeah. But yeah, this album, it's simple and whatever, but it also is, yeah, you said this when you listened to it and you messaged me. This is like the DNA of acoustic grunge.
Yes. 100%.
This is the DNA of like what we would hear later on coming out of, Nirvana's Unplugged, a lot of Alice in Chains. I can hear a lot of this album influencing Alice in Chains. Yeah, this to the point where Nirvana's Unplugged album, Dave Grohl has said that this was used as a template for how they wanted their Unplugged album to be.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Alice in Chains, because there is a lot of Alice in Chains on this album. Like, they owe royalty. Alice in Chains owns royalty, because I don't think you would have Alice in Chains without this album.
No, if you listen to Alice in Chains before this album, I think if you listen to like Facelift, and then this album, and then you listen to Dirt, you can tell it's very Lanegan-ish.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so. Like, people owe him, like, yes, like, yeah, go on.
Yeah, so the reason why I picked it again is like, this is a DNA album. I like looking at the DNA albums a lot. It gives us a lot to kind of riff off of too. But it's also fascinating for me to kind of see where elements of popular music kind of like germinated from.
Yes.
You and I were, I know for myself, I was too young when Nirvana came out, so I didn't really give a shit when Nevermind blew up. Like, it just was not in my wheelhouse because I wasn't watching MTV. I was just being a fat kid playing video games.
So, okay. Very different for me, because I had two older sisters that were very much into MTV. And my sister, the oldest one, she was going into high school when Nevermind blew up and grunge came out, and she was very much into that scene, very, very much into that scene. So like, I remember being around like the genesis of grunge, even like, Smashing Pumpkins' first album, all that stuff. Like, I was really in it because I would go down to my sister's basement when she would get stoned with her friends, and they'd be listening to a lot of grunge music at the time. Nirvana, like I said, Smashing Pumpkins. There's a few other bands, that didn't go anywhere, like Catherine's Wheel, that kind of thing. So I actually remember when Nevermind blew up and was just like, holy shit! Like, I was listening to grunge when in 1990 pretty religiously.
Yes, my brother was listening to The Chronic and shit like that, like hip hop. My brother like really went into hip hop, so grunge just passed me by. Like, I remember like kind of Smells Like Teen Spirit when it came up, but like it didn't hit me like I think I hit a lot of other people because I was just not attuned to popular music. Like, I just listened to either what my brother was playing, which was again hip hop. He was really into hip hop. And my stuff my dad liked, which was, his 70s, 60s, 70s rock. So Nirvana and Pearl Jam, that wave, like, by the time I'm old enough and I'm 13 and, 13 and like 94, I just had no, by the time I'm listening to music, I'm into like Nine Inch Nails and Revolting Cocks and shit like that. So like, grunge just passed. I didn't even really listen to Nevermind until I was like 20.
Oh wow. See, yeah, I remember when that first came out. So musically, I had my oldest sister who was very much into the grunge, even and a lot of the college indie rock that was going on at the time, like REM, 10,000 Maniacs, all that stuff. So she was like really into alternative rock, grunge, that whole scene. Then my other sister was in the fucking show tunes and um, and 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 movie soundtracks, like Bette Midler and shit. Like I can't, like it would be really weird, like because my room was upstairs, and I was the last one to be able to use the bathroom to get ready for school. So my oldest sister got it first, so I'd be listening to, it'd be going from like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, to Natalie Merchant and REM, and then my next sister would come in, and I'd be listening to the fucking Grease soundtrack and Beaches soundtrack, and this really poppy Madonna, like really poppy stuff. And then I'd get in there, and I had like my Weird Al tapes and my Ray Stevens stuff that I was into because I was weird as a kid. And then my dad, he was into Phil Collins, Moody Blues, that style, Elvis. And then my mom, she was into Alice in Chains. I mean, not Alice in Chains. She got into the grunge, but she was in like Alice Cooper, AC/DC, Aerosmith, that 70s, 80s rock. So I had like a really weird, eclectic music growing up, and it was really schizophrenic.
Well, that's good. I think, having that kind of different, exposures really like forms kind of like your music taste. And like I said, like it was NWA and Eazy-E and Public Enemy, and then 90 wherever the Chronic came out, and that Snoop Dogg Death Row Record shit, and then my dad's classic rock.
Right. And so for me, I think where you got into the hip hop and the gangster rap and that whole vibe and movement, that was stuff I didn't get into until I was about 15, 16, and even like into our late. And like I remember going back and listening to NWA years after it came out and being like, holy shit, and listening to the Chronic, when the second Chronic came out. And so I missed a lot of that, and like going back, and like the little exposure I did get was my mom liked Walk This Way, the Aerosmith and what's Run DMC. That was like that right there was the closest to ever having any kind of urban music in my household. Yeah.
Yeah. So we both had very strict, but like again, so grunge didn't impact me, and I remember in like 96, I remember Screaming Trees did have a video, and I thought the song was good, but like that was about all my exposure to Mr. Lanegan in his career. And then listening after he passed, like there's a lot of good shit, and again, like more interesting than this album's like a guy dipping his foot in the water with songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
But for what it is, it's all right.
Well,
it's good when it's good, and it's boring when it's boring.
I would compare him to being the Slick Rick of the grunge world.
Yeah.
Slick Rick. I don't know people. I mean, a lot of people when I say Slick Rick, I get a glazed over look, like, who the fuck are you talking about? Slick Rick is probably the most sampled hip hop artist of all time, and really laid the groundwork for what is and has become modern. And I think Slick Rick, honestly, his legacy is maybe even a little bit more, because I think even to this day, people are ripping him off and taking his stuff, but I don't even think they know it anymore. Kind of like how people don't realize, like the Parliament Funkadelic and how a lot of like Snoop Dogg and those people took from them. But whereas I know grunge isn't really much around anymore, but you still hear the influence of this album and what it did. There's a lot of times I was just listening to this and I was like, with a little bit more production value, this would have been the definitive grunge album of all time.
Yeah, I agree. A little more better production, a little more focus on the songs, I think. Mm-hmm. But again, this was a one-off for Sub Pop. Mm-hmm. Sub Pop at this time, was really promoting like all these other bands, and didn't even think twice about Lanegan or ironically Nirvana. They didn't think Nirvana was going to amount to anything.
Yeah,
probably their biggest mistake.
huge. And I will admit, I'm a big Sub Pop fan. Like I actually I don't subscribe to a lot on YouTube. I subscribe to their channel on YouTube. I really, really enjoy the music that Sub Pop has put out throughout the years. And
Sub Pop is great. Like, and they put out. I mean, like this early wave. They had so many good. Like Soundgarden, I think they had like one album on Sub Pop. I could be wrong. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you're right.
Yeah, Mark Arms band. What's it? Mudhoney.
Mudhoney.
Another band that I really enjoy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this was for them. It was different because this was like not like grunge was like at the time was like fast and loud, and you had like Chris Cornell vocals or Eddie Vedder vocals. It really like this album just kind of slowed it down and did something kind of different that those other bands kind of just either subconsciously or consciously like just sucked into their sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, people. I would encourage you. Yeah, Soundgarden was on there. I mean, they had Sleater Kinney for Christ's sakes on Sub Pop. I mean, Sub Pop was. We should do I would love one time we and I should try to sit back and just maybe one day rather than doing an album and not now, but do a podcast about Sub Pop because that's so eclectic what they did. But yeah, anyways, we're digressing, and I apologize.
Yeah, so let's get into the album, Paul. You want to do track by track?
We could do track by track. That is just fine.
Track by track. It's not a long album. It's 40-minute long.
Yeah, it's a very short album.
Very short. But yeah, again, it's kind of jarring that this was just like Sub Pop's like, yeah, okay, just do this, and like they get this, and people gotta remember this is 1990. We're still 2 years away from grunge blowing up.
Yeah,
Even though like 10 and Nevermind were released in 91, they didn't start really selling until 92. And then by 94, 95, the whole scene's done. Which is really like, I think people like have like this weird nostalgia for grunge, but it really had a small window.
It was a very small window. I would say, I mean, it was still going, but I'd say by 97, especially by 97, it was in its death rattle. I mean, you had some artists coming out, but people have moved on from grunge because I remember like our freshman year in high school, people were doing the Kurt Cobain, even then, flannel and all that stuff. And by our sophomore, junior year, that was gone. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's start it off, Paul. Let's start with Mockingbirds, which really kind of sets the tone.
It does
sonically and vocally and lyrically.
So, again, as I said, and I've criticized a lot of. So I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't criticize this. The production is not well done. I mean, this definitely feels like a demo album.
Yeah. Real DIY. Yeah, 1990 Sub Pop does not have a lot of money.
No. They hadn't blown up yet with a lot of their artists. They've had a few here and there, but their heyday was probably about another 6-7 years away. And
they didn't start making money until Nirvana blew up, and then Bleach started selling.
Yeah, but then they started really signing. I mean, it was Nirvana made up some money, but it wasn't until a little bit after that they really started like trying to really seek out bands that were more so being a little bit more picky about some of the bands they picked up. Or being like, hey, these guys are hits. Like all of a sudden they started just picking up amazing bands. So yeah, Mockingbird. And I'm glad you said that it was his learning lyrics because lyrically. This whole album is very, I don't want to say uninspired or boring, but it's, I thought he was burnt out and like completely fucked up on drugs when he's writing these things. I'm like, okay, he's got fucking heroin brain. He's trying to come up with these lyrics. And I feel bad now that, It's just like, no, he was sober. He just never did it before. So for a guy who never did it before, this is all right.
It's not bad. If somebody had me a guitar and said, do a solo album, like, I'd be fucked. I wouldn't be able to put something out like this.
Would you steal $10,000 and only make it for $3, Joe? No, Mockingbird really, and like right away, I heard in the first opening guitar notes to it, I can hear it. I'm like, that is Alice in Chains.
Yep. That's what I was saying. That sounds right out of Dirt, like
that sounds,
a demo from the Dirt album or Jar of Flies.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I'm thinking to myself again. I didn't put the year together, and I'm going, man, this guy really stole some people's stuff. And then you go, no, this was 3 years beforehand, and you go, someone owes this guy money.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think he got burned a lot, but he also, he had his troubles. Courtney Love actually helped get him sober. After all this, like by the late 90s, Lanegan was pretty much homeless, crack addict, heroin addict. Just sleeping wherever he can find a bed or the streets. Yeah, like he was like, after, because Screaming Trees never found fame. He never really made it with his solo career. So yeah, that's where he was. And then, she helped him get sobered up. He was just, he was a mess. He was the guy Cobain was calling the day he killed himself. And he was so fucked. I guess he was so fucked up and just not wanting to deal with it. He refused to answer his phone.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And that's something he kind of, from what I read, he's regretted deeply because he was such a good, they're close friends, but he was just like, he's an addict too, and he just doesn't want to deal.
Oh God.
Yeah. And makes matters worse. Years later, he finds a friend in Anthony Bourdain.
Oh no!
Yeah. So Anthony Bourdain's "Parts Unknown," the theme song is written and performed by Lanegan, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Bourdain was instrumental in Lanegan writing a memoir. He really pushed it when he didn't want to. It was one of his closest friends, and then Cobain, he lost another friend by suicide.
Poor Lanegan. Fuck.
Yeah, he had a hard knock life, buddy.
Yeah, well, and again, he's writing this shit before all the depression shit happened. Yeah, he's writing fuck. This is a downer. This is a downer of it.
Yeah, well, his childhood was pretty bad. His mom was verbally abusive. His dad was a raging alcoholic. He was like I said, he was a drunk by 14, 15.
Good on him for finding fame. And we'll get to it when we get to some of the other songs. But yeah, so Museum again, it
just feels like it's like this could have been part of Mockingbirds. I felt like these songs kind of went together.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And if he was more focused, again, he was pretty green songwriter. So this felt like these two songs should have been combined to a stronger song.
Agree. Thank you for saying it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's where Undertow. I like the actual the acoustic guitar on the. One thing I do like is the acoustic guitar, even though it's simple and sometimes just sounds out of tune. Sometimes it flourishes, and it's another thing too because his buddies would come in. He would do the basic track, and they would come in and do the more finessing little riffs.
Yeah.
Because he just couldn't, he just learned, he picked up a chord book. Yeah, so going into this album, you had to pick up a chord book and learn how to play chords.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. And good for him. There's talent there if that's what he did. Picked up a chord book at $3,000, came out with this. Fucking A.
Yeah, it shows just, it's interesting. It's just just a pretty green songwriter. He's still fuck, I'm going to try. and like he eventually develops into a better songwriter. But it's interesting, like seeing it happen. Like kind of like hearing on record. And, like I'm sure he didn't really care for this album. Like years later, like
Well, and and I will say with Undertow, that's really where I started to feel the Nirvana Unplugged album was in this song. I was like, wow. And again, not knowing, I was like, man, this guy really, really liked the Unplugged album.
Oh, 1990. We're still 4 years away from
We're far away from for Kurt Cobain's funeral. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
By the way, that's what we called me and my buddy Rick. That's what we called the Unplugged album. Was Kurt Cobain's funeral, because it was like right before he died and had like all these flowers and everything. When you look back, it's a funeral.
Read into it, like people, the set designers felt like he was setting up his own funeral.
Yeah,
and the older I get, the less tolerant I am of Kurt Cobain.
Agreed.
Like I just at this point, I'm just like he was just a whiny little bitch.
Supposedly, and again, I'm going to get off track here. Supposedly, a guy that I hung out the Java joint a lot. Supposedly, a guy that we hung out at the Java joint with knew Kurt Cobain for about 6 months when he lived in Seattle, before he got famous, and said that he couldn't stand being like, he eventually stopped taking Kurt Cobain's calls and like hanging out with him and shit because he couldn't put up with his whining. Like, I guess he was just according to this guy, again, I don't know if it's true or not, people make up stories all the time, but he said that Kurt Cobain was this really entitled dude that when he didn't get his way would throw tantrums. And he said it would happen like when they would go out and get something to eat, like someone fucked up his sandwich, he would throw a fit. And he's just like, eventually I just had to stop hanging out with the dude. He's like, little did I know this guy was going to become super fucking famous.
Yeah, but, there's only so much of that bullshit you can handle. Like, I wouldn't have been able to tolerate that either.
Right.
And you read up on Cobain, he was just a whiny little bitch.
Right, and this is why I somewhat believe this guy, because this was years before all the stories came out. Like, this is still when everyone was glorifying him, like, as this rock god that died, and this guy's going, he wasn't really that good of a dude.
Yeah, well, read some Buzz Osborne interviews where he was friends with him, but he doesn't shy on like pointing out how insufferable Cobain could be at times.
Yeah. So then we get Ugly Sunday. I like Ugly Sunday, actually. I like the song a lot.
I really liked it, and it really reminded me of like an updated version of Sunday Morning Coming Down by Chris Christopherson and Johnny Cash, kind of, but like more twisted. It was like if that song was written by Charles Bukowski.
Oh, I didn't know that. I did not know that. Yeah, no, I also felt lyrically this is one of the more stronger songs. Where I felt like he had more to say on this one. Like, I felt this was a more insightfully lyrically.
Feels like he's more opening up and kind of using his own experiences for a song, where instead of just writing songs for writing a song.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was a highlight I noted from Down in the Dark. It was more of a rock song. Again, features Cobain on vocals.
Okay, I thought so. I knew he was on a different song. I was like, man, either Cobain is on this, or he could really nail Cobain. So I'm glad that you.
I don't know if he could nail the Cobain voice, but he really has like more of a Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits thing going on.
Kinda, yeah. Okay, yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's a fine song. Wildflowers I liked a lot.
I like Wildflowers a lot. Yeah, this is, I think, if not one of the strongest tracks on the album.
It's my favorite song on the album.
Okay, then, okay, yeah. I mean, not that I have to agree with you, but yeah, I feel like this was like...
You must agree with me!
I must agree with you, otherwise no soup for you. Yes, yeah. This is a great song, just lyrically, sonically. I feel like this is the one that got the most attention.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, it's followed by Eyes of a Child.
Yeah, that's not a great.
I hate the concept of like Eyes of a Child. It's such a cliche writing thing. Again, he's a newer writer, so I'm not going to dig on him too much. But this is like,
Yeah,
it's cliched. Yeah, we get it because the eyes of a child are innocent.
Yep. You're not. You're the umpteenth million person to say about that.
Yeah.
So next we get the Winding Sheet, which is interesting that's the one they picked as the title track to it. It's one of the longer songs, if I'm remembering correctly.
It actually kind of sounds more like a Tom Waits song to me than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't really match much, but lyrically, again, I liked it. Sound-wise, it was okay, but not as strong as Wildflowers, in my opinion.
Wildflowers for me is the highlight. Wildflowers and Ugly Sunday.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the other ones.
Oh, yeah. Whoa, I liked Whoa.
Yeah, I like the cyanide and nicotine, filling themselves up with poisons.
Yeah, I like the I'd rather be drunk than dead, or go where Jesus fled, so I'll get drunk again, or maybe not. I love that.
Yeah, he has like moments where he shines lyrically on this album.
Yeah.
Where is it? With Wildflowers, my mind is an open door with nothing inside. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? The line, I forget which song is it, but he's like, can't kill them, but they're already dead. But like, I don't blame them for trying.
Yes.
Like those little play with lyrics. I think he's starting to like, again, this is like a Genesis type album where he's starting to find his way, and I think he's finding his way with the words a bit here. He's just not confident enough to go all in.
No. Next we get 10 Feet Tall. Okay, so funny story about 10 Feet Tall. And I don't know if you had the same experience I did with it, but maybe you did. I'm listening to it while I'm driving, and I went, this dude's a racist.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mislearned the lyrics and going, well, come on, black kids sing. And I'm like, wait, what? What? And then I had to go back and look at the lyrics. I'm like, I'm not comfortable with this. And then I'm like, Black Cat. And I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, no, the first time I heard it, I just, like, my heart sunk. And I was like, oh, fuck, we're canceled.
Yeah. The 90s, 1990, people weren't woke.
Well, no, they weren't wrong, but I mean, again, I mistook it as Black Kids Sing, and I was like,
instead of Black Cat.
Yeah, instead of Black Cat, and like I said, the first time I was listening to it, I'm like, whoa, and I actually almost pulled over, and I pulled up the lyrics. I was like, the fuck is he saying?
Yeah, from what I can tell in his book, he's not a fan of conservatism, so.
No. And when you look at it, like, Black Cat, being, again, the omen of what a black cat is and what it represents, it makes more sense. Like,
and it also, and it really just because this album feels dark.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a lot of imagery, like a black cat and shit, where it's dark. I mean, this
dark.
album just feels. It's unrelentingly dark until you get to Juarez, and we'll get to that because there's a funny story for that one.
So because we got a lot to talk about with that one. But real quick with what as you're saying with it being really dark. So again, I'm listening to this album. I listened to this album a lot because we got behind a week, and I'll be honest, I really wanted to be sure of what songs sounded like what, because there's a lot of, one of the things we complain about, or I complain about, is things sounding the same. So I was getting some of the songs like, wait, which song was that again that sounded like that? So I listened to this album way too much.
Yeah.
To the point
it also repeats the riff from Mockingbirds occasionally throughout songs, almost like a running theme.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was like disciplined enough.
Right.
So like,
Right.
I don't know if it was even intentional on his part. He just like, I like that line, so let's keep doing it here.
That's yeah. I don't think there was a lot. I don't think it was meant to be like a concept. I think it was. I mean, knowing that he just picked up a guitar and did it, he probably was like, I like the sound of that, so I'm gonna do a variation of it. But it really wasn't a variation because he wasn't astute enough to do it.
Yeah, he wasn't disciplined at all.
He wasn't disciplined at all. Yeah, this album really fucked with my mood.
Yeah, it's dark. There's a lot of dark themes.
It's a very dark album.
I don't know. It feels like he has some demons, Paul.
Well, we got Where Did You Sleep Last Night, Joe?
Yeah, so my buddy turned me onto this album like 7 years ago. And when I got to this, I was like, son of a bitch, Nirvana ripped this guy off. Because this is this exact same arrangement from Nirvana's Unplugged. And the exact same lyrics, which is like, the Lead Belly cover, there's always, it's weird because when you hear Lead Belly covers, especially of Where Did You Sleep Last Night, there's always, people are always dicking around with the lyrics, taking liberties with it and changing them.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you hear an exact same reference of Where Did You Sleep Last Night, it stands out. And then I found out that Chris Novoselic and Kurt Cobain actually play on this. And then they just used this arrangement on the Nirvana Unplugged, which I think I like the Unplugged version more, but I like the bass on this. I like how the bass and the drumming on this whole album are just, for a slow acoustic album, are kind of punishing and intimidating. Like, it's really like a weird dynamic for an acoustic album.
Very, very.
But it is. It's very menacing bass. So like boom, 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 boom. And I also kind of like that simplicity of like, you really don't hear a lot of the guitar on it.
No, and I will say that again, we've criticized Cobain quite a bit, but
that's because he's a chucklehead, Paul.
It's because he's a chucklehead, but the guy could sing, and the guy, I mean, comparing the vocals of Mark to Kurt Cobain, there's really no comparison there. Yeah. So, and tell the story that you told me about the Unplugged version.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I came across the thing, but rumor has it they wanted Lanegan. Because they had the Meat Puppets played on the Meat Puppet songs that were covered.
Yep.
Another interesting story is like when the Meat Puppets played Electric Fetus when I worked there, and they played. So they're really cool guys. So rumor has it they wanted Lanegan, but he was so. The thing is with heroin junkies, or junkies in general, people are addicts. I think junkies are pretty derogatory, so I apologize. Addicts in general are often afraid of how they're going to get their next fix.
Oh, yeah.
So apparently he did not want to go to New York because he wasn't sure where he would be able to score heroin. I don't know if there's any validity to that because I'm pretty sure he would have easily found heroin in New York. It might have been he just didn't want to do it.
Well, and I know people. I mean, we've both known people who are full-blown addicts, and I know people that are heroin addicts. We went to school with a couple of heroin addicts. And luckily, at least what I've known throughout the years, she's now clean and having a really good life. But I could imagine not even wanting to be on a plane and worried about going from one place to the next, hours on the plane and not being able to score. I could see where you wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, going from wherever, California to New York, or Oregon or Washington to New York, that's not I mean, in the realm of us being on a plane, it's not that bad, but in the realm of being an addict on a plane, that's a long fucking time.
Yeah, especially if you can't bring your drugs on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I could see that too. His book starts. The book I'm reading, his memoir starts. He's getting busted by cops in the late 90s in Seattle. And his number one concern isn't like whatever. His number one concern is he hadn't shot up since the morning, and he's afraid he's going to start withdrawing while he's in the jail. So like that's his biggest concern because that's the most painful thing he can go through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dude,
heroin. Like I just.
Yeah,
Such a vicious drug.
I thank God every day that I'm afraid of needles.
Me too. Me too. Like I couldn't, like when I got my vaccine, I couldn't even look when they.
I can't. No. I've had a couple of surgeries, and like when they put the IV in, I cannot look.
Oh,
oh no!
They draw blood. I can't even look.
I can't. Nope. I have to look the other way when they draw blood, and which is ridiculous because I love, you and I both love our horror, our gore, or that type of thing. But when I know it's real, it bothers me to my core.
Like needles in movies, like the heroin scene in Pulp Fiction, still gets me the willies just because I hate that shit.
And Requiem for a Dream was so difficult for me to watch.
Yeah,
it's so difficult for me to watch, but
for many reasons that movie's difficult to watch. It's not a summertime blockbuster where you just watch.
I tell people, I'm like, I will never watch this movie again, but if you haven't seen it, you need to see it the one and only time.
Yeah, it's worth seeing, but it's such an uncomfortable movie.
Yeah, they're like, well, you watch it. Oh God, oh. Kudos, Jennifer Connelly deserved an Oscar. But back to this version of the song. Yes, you could tell that this is, but when you listen to it on the Unplugged, you can really tell that Cobain has probably been shopping it and workshopping it for a long time.
Yeah, it was part of Nirvana would play it live every now and then, but they would play it electric, which was weird. I've heard electric covers of them doing it.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. I haven't heard that, but I mean, if it was this version if it was like this version with Kurt Cobain's lyrics on it, I think that'd be the definitive version, personally.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear an Unplugged in another universe, Unplugged with Cobain and Lanegan singing this at Unplugged. Both of them like fucked out of their minds on heroin.
I couldn't imagine.
That would probably be the definitive version, and some universe has it. Fuck them.
And we don't get it because we live in the darkest fucking time.
Yeah, we got the dumbest time.
We really do. We got fucked, dude. I don't know what we did in all of our previous lives or what we've been doing to get pushed down the darkest timeline, but apparently I'm a fucking bastard. So Joe, next we get
Juarez, yeah. So in his book, Lanegan talks about this. Because they're recording this album, and it's really dark and heavy, and it's got like these, ideas and concepts and this feel. And then one day in the studio, this guy's like dicking around on a keyboard or something. Lanegan starts riffing off it, and that's where Juarez comes. And the guys working on the album with him were like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to put it on the album." I'm like, dude, whoa, you got this like beautiful dark little album. Why are you going to put like this song on it? He's basically, I needed some levity. This album's dark. Let's have a little moment of like, even in his dark, twisted sense of humor, it's still like a funny song, even though it's, talking about shit in your pants because you're going to be on the nod from heroin, which, is a thing that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, if you watched, what happens is that heroin backs you up, and when you've been shooting up for a long time. So I worked at a gas station in the hood, and we had a guy that would come in who was a notorious heroin user, and he would keep an enema in his back pocket. And he would come in and use the enema because, you get backed up, and then what happens is that you see on Train Spotting when Spud passes out and wakes up, and the heroin's gone through his system, he hasn't shit for days, so it just comes out.
Yeah.
And so, but I also have a feeling that there's way more to this song that we didn't get, and he was like, nope, I went too far with some personal lyrics, and we can't have that.
Yeah, I feel like it too. I feel like there was, this was a longer song, but they condensed it into like a more not as fucked up version.
Well, because it starts to cut out where you're a preacher's daughter, I'm a bastard son, and you can tell that he was about to say, or they cut it off, and he's saying more shit, and I'm going, oh, someone got personal. Someone got personal in their lyrics and was like, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get Love You Little Girl, which is a great way to end the album. Yeah. It's basically a full-on acoustic song. There's not a lot to it other than the acoustic guitar, from what I remember.
Yeah.
Lyrically, it's very boring.
Yeah. It's fine to end it on that. I mean, if you ended it on Juarez, that'd be pretty fucked up.
That would be pretty fucked up. But again, it reminds me of, okay, so that's the preacher's daughter. I want to know more about the story of Juarez.
Yeah, whoa, let's wind this back here.
Yeah, hang on. Because I cranked it up to see if I could hear any more of it, but they cut it off. But yeah, I was like, fuck, I want to know more about what he was saying. I'm really interested. You got me sold on Juarez, buddy. Yeah. Overall, a short album, a good, as you said, DNA album. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's an interesting album. You find the DNA of a lot of the grunge that would come after. Like, this is kind of the precursor to what was going to explode in a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, he didn't get to really reap a lot of those rewards. But
no,
he's still he made some really interesting music after this. Like after he leaves Screaming Trees, I mean, fuck, he's like in Queens of the Stone Age. He's on Rated R, Songs for the Deaf, and Lullabies to Paralyze, which are like solid run of Queen's albums.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. His solo albums like Bubblegum. Like I sent you I'm like, after you listen to this album, listen to Methamphetamine Blues,
yeah,
which is like fucking bonkers.
Yeah. So, I guess he was also involved in Uncle.
Yeah,
I didn't know. I didn't know he was involved in Uncle. That's amazing.
Yeah, he was like, it's weird where he just kind of like ends up, and it's not like Seattle grunge stuff all the time. He did with Isabel Campbell from Belle and Sebastian, and that's a beautiful album.
That's crazy. You would not think him and Belle and Sebastian. You would not.
No, but they did this album. It's fucking great.
That's
it's
amazing.
It's a beautiful album, and again, he did Moby and Chris Christopherson. You're like, what the fuck? Like, he was very prolific and very just like his music gets way more interesting than this. This is like a guy just starting to learn to write a song.
Wow. Yeah. No. It's that. I mean, that's nuts to me. I do have to check out that book when you're. I'm gonna have to check out that book because I do want to know more about him because that's fascinating to me. That is absolutely fascinating. And he was doing music up until the day he died.
Yeah. And he wrote a memoir. So he got COVID, and they put him in a coma-induced, or they put him in an induced coma because to fight COVID. And when he woke up and was recovering, he wrote another memoir while recovering.
Oh my God!
Called, like, this is a guy just like he always very creative, always looking for a creative way to express himself, and that's just like. Just impressive to me. Like, I appreciate artists like that who aren't afraid to take risks. And this album, even though we've talked, it has a lot of flaws. It was a fucking risk.
Yeah.
I mean, not financially or anything, but I think ego-wise, because when you're a creative person and something flops, that could easily just derail your.
We've seen it many times. We've talked about artists with that within this podcast itself.
Yep.
Where that album, destroyed their ego. Yeah, absolutely.
This guy just kept going, just kept doing it.
Jesus. So, Joe, would you recommend this album?
Yeah, I would recommend it. It's not the best, like you said. It's not the best album we've reviewed, but it's an interesting. On a couple of levels, it's interesting in that it's if you want to kind of see where a lot of the influence on grunge kind of starts. This is probably where you should start.
Mm-hmm.
and it's also interesting, like seeing a guy starting a songwriting career like that, just like how it germinates and seeing what he does later on. It's just that's interesting. And it's not a bad album either. It has its moments where it really shines for me. Like
Sure.
Wildflowers, that was such a good song.
It's a good song. It's a good song. Yeah, Wildflowers is a good song. I'm gonna say no with a caveat, and hear me out. Um, that I would say listen to some of his later stuff first, and then go back and listen to this. Because as you and I have talked about, with other things, we personally love DNA albums. I could see where some people, this is their introduction to him, might not. And again, unless you're like, again, with me, like music, and you and I with music and history, right? Like when I got into Pink Floyd, the first album I bought was Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Then I bought Saucer Full of Secrets. Then I bought more. Like I went chronologically through.
Which for other people would probably make them never want to listen to Pink Floyd.
Right. But for me, I really enjoy that journey, right? Like I enjoy seeing where a band starts out and where they go. So if that's you, then by all means, yes, I recommend starting with this album. But as you and I have talked about too, there are better albums that he's put out that I think.
Yeah, I would start with Bubblegum if I was going to. That one's just phenomenal. PJ Harvey on it.
That's amazing. Great. I love PJ Harvey. I do. I love PJ Harvey.
She does Hit the City with him, and that's such a good song.
So yeah, I mean, in that regards, I would say check out some of his later stuff and then go back and listen to this. Yeah. If you listen to this and went, well, I really want to hear like what they're talking about, like with being like, that Alice in Chains ripped them off, and that they did this and that, then yeah, listen to it. But honestly, like looking at it from a critical standpoint, I can't really recommend it outside of for curiosity's sake, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So, all right, Joe. Well, awesome pick on this album. I'm really glad you did that. Sorry we had the mix up these last 2 weeks of trying to get this done. So, no, it's not that you guys are missing an episode. It's that my schedule fucked us up. So, Joe, plugs. What do you got going on?
The Joe Down. We're switching gears. We're not doing Predator 2. In a few days, the Batman review will be coming.
Ooh, I want to go see that movie so bad.
Yeah, I think Brown took it because I was just like, when he's like, yeah, I saw it, it's pretty good. I'm like, yeah, I liked it when it was called Seven. Stay back, John Doe has the upper hand. What's in the box?
What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Yeah, I heard it's more of a detective film than it is a superhero film,
which makes it a lot more entertaining for me. Yeah. I liked it a lot more. It was good. It was just, it wore its influence on its sleeve, like Joker did with Scorsese.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I will say that was one of the things I liked more about The Dark Knight, the Batman, the Christopher Nolan one, was it felt like there was more of like a detective story there than it was like all this over the top superhero stuff that you see like with the Marvel universe. I felt there was some kind of grounding in terms of like him trying to solve this and what was going on. And granted, you had the obligatory superhero stuff. So I am really interested to see it as a detective film. So that's cool. I can't wait to see your review of that. Do you guys got anything planned after the Batman, or not willing to give that away yet?
Brown hasn't given me his pick, so I don't.
Okay. All right. And as of right now, probably until summer, this is going to be it for what I'm doing. I might add another podcast and might go back and revisit the Stranger Things one once Griffini's got summer vacation. See if that will work out. So yeah. All right, Joe. You're gonna ask me what we're doing next week?
What are we doing next week, Paul?
So I scared you. I'm gonna bring this up to the audience. So I sent Joe a Carpenter's version of a Beatles song, And Joe was like, dude, I can pull this out of my back pocket and ruin your day.
Yeah. What did I send you right back, Paul?
You sent me back Paul Anka doing, was it Nirvana? I think it
Yeah, it
was.
smells like Teen
Yeah,
Spirit.
it smelled like Teen Spirit. So the reason why I sent that to you was I read an article where they talked about how the Carpenters ruined one of the Beatles' earliest heavy metal songs, and I'm like,
Actually like Karen Carpenter's vocals on that.
I like Karen Carpenter's vocals. I mean, but let's be honest. I mean, I've made us listen to some white music. We're not going to go there right now.
No, like the cover itself, like I wasn't. It was perfectly fine. I've heard a lot worse Beatles songs. Plus, Karen Carpenter has a beautiful voice. So
She does. Karen Carpenter does. But in this article, they're like, John Lennon said that this was one of the early roots of heavy metal. Was Ticket to Ride, which I thought was weird.
Lennon liked to take credit for everything, so.
And I'm like, that's not a heavy metal song, but in this particular article for the song, and I never heard that version of it, they're like, yeah, the Carpenters took everything that was, that was subversive and dangerous in Ticket to Ride and made it completely boring and neutered. And
I would argue Ticket to Ride was already boring and neutered to begin with. Listen, I think people overestimate. Like, I love the Beatles, but let's not overestimate. They could have some schmaltz. They had wider music than the Carpenters ever put out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yes.
I will.
So, Joe, we're gonna do
Martha, My Dear.
Martha, My Dear. Yeah, that's not a great song. So, Joe, we're gonna do. As I talked about, my oldest sister influenced me very much in music, and as I said, after doing fucking Pat Boone, I needed some positives in my life. So we're actually going to go back even a couple years before Mark Lanegan. We're going to go back to 1985, and we are going to do the Dead Milkmen's debut album, Big Lizard in My Backyard.
Oh, cool.
So I'm sure you're familiar with this album.
Yeah, I am.
So hopefully our audience isn't. But this is one of my favorite albums of all time.
I thought your favorite album of all time was Cracked Rearview Mirror by Hootie and the Blowfish.
I want to be with you. What if girls are going down there cry? No, fuck you.
Oh, I get it. Pocket Full of Kryptonite by the Spin Doctors.
The Spin Doctors. Oh my god, that was the song. Two Tails, right? Two Princes. Oh my god. Okay, so real quick, I gotta tell you this story.
Oh, Paul's got a Spin Doctor story.
Not a Spin Doctor story, but along the same lines, a Delamitri story. So years and years ago, there was the Edge radio station that played a lot of it became kind of a rock thing later, but it was doing a lot of like the alternative college rock at the time, and they used to have this thing called Edgecapades, where they bring in all these bands, like they brought in Blimp and Ween and all these bands. Anyways, and they had a guy named Diaper Boy on the radio station that they'd make go out, wear a diaper, and interview people on the street.
That man ended up doing the Steel Toe radio show.
Dude, me and him are already in a feud. Let's not. I don't know if you know that story or not, but that's
I'm aware, but
yep,
like you said, like I'm taking what you said. He started off as Diaper Boy.
He started off as Diaper Boy, and then later had to go on his own show and school him. But no, Delamitri was playing, and people went into the bathroom and got toilet paper and were chucking it at them, like booing them to get off the stage. And so they did their one hit and got off stage. And Diaper Boy went to dive off the fucking speaker, and nobody would catch him.
No wonder he started that Steel Tail radio show.
Yeah, we
Not on actual radio, everybody. It's a podcast now.
It is a podcast now. He got kicked off the air.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
No, not a nicer guy. Fuck that guy. That's another story for another time. But yeah, so we're gonna do, and this was, I would say, my introduction into punk was this album. This album was when I really first listened to punk, and like this made me realize that I needed to have way more punk in my life. Yep. And I listened to this album, probably, I was maybe about 4 or 5 when I listened to this album. Yeah, I think because my sister got it a year or 2 after it came out. Yep. Mm-hmm. So, Big Lizard in My Backyard, Joe.
All right.
You there? You there? Okay, you're there. All right, Joe. Well, do you want to take us out?
No.
This has been Rate That Album with Paul Muad'Dib and Joe Fremming. Thank you for listening.